Are traps gay? A question as old as time, or at least like 2004. Welcome to another installment of our ever-popular series where I try to expand my dating pool by helping y'all figure your shit out. If you've ever found yourself wondering whether or not something is gay, then congrats! This is the video for you. And I'm not here today to bore you with how traps aren't a real thing or how they're a dangerous transphobic trope that literally gets trans people abused and killed. Other people have made plenty of wonderful videos about that. I am here today to provide not only much needed transmasculine representation in this discussion, but also answers. I have solved your riddle, Reddit 4chan and the bunch. I have solved it, so you dumb horny may rest you pondering forevermore. I've been working on this for 3 months. Please enjoy. Some notes to begin with. If any of this seems overly heterocentric, it's because it is. Because usually the only people concerning themselves with whether or not things are gay are the straights. Us gays out here like walks in the park, gay. Baking stuff, gay. Staring out the window, watching the neighborhood cats pass by, alone with our mind, feeling it slowly disintegrate with no one here to save us from the darkness of the void. Gay. Also, I work with trans people at several LGBT+ and trans charities that I volunteer at, and I wrote my actual bachelor dissertation on the fetishization of androgyny in anime. So this whole subject is like my literal area of expertise. Trust me, I'm a professional. LOL. Let's start by explaining what the hell a trap even is. Supposing we all already know what gay means. Trap is the name given by Western anime fans to the narrative trope of usually an amab person dressing as a woman in order to trick straight cis men into feeling attracted to them despite them not being a cis woman. We will also extend it to examples involving afab characters and cis women because #feminism. We do not support phallocentricity on this channel, thank you very much. First of all, let's get realism straight. Funny. Actual genderqueer people don't present the way we do in order to trick anyone. We're just out here living our genderqueer lives while other people make assumptions and then get upset when they turn out to be wrong. Now mind you, that is something that happens to everyone. Damn, this is a good game. What do you mean she? Avery, huh? What do you mean he? Putting aside the fact that anime still refuses to give me cool androgynous afab characters to identify with, traps are reveal narratives. A character is presented and we draw on conclusions on what we think their gender is, which then get debunked when the character's actual gender is revealed. I'm using gender here to mean gender experience as a whole rather than gender identity. So for example, cis and trans women have the same gender identity, women, but they have different gender experiences. To use the examples, Julia is an illustrator, a streamer and YouTuber, and a gender non-conforming cis woman. She does woodworking and watch building and wears suits and she's cool as heck and we love her. I'm getting off topic. Between the long blonde hair, the general steampunk vibes and their androgynous clothing style, the comparison between her and Avery makes sense. However, our issue with finding out that Avery is not a woman lies in that very comparison. Our assumption of sameness to Julia has colored our judgment of him. We accepted his feminine aspects in assumption of womanhood, we accepted his masculine aspects as quirky gender nonconformity as permitted for afabs by #feminism. But then upon finding out that this person isn't a woman, we are upset. On one hand, there's the idea that the masculine bits gave it away and we just didn't pick up on the hint, so we feel dumb. And we don't like feeling dumb. On the other hand, there is an outrage at Avery's feminine aspects because feminism's little brother movement, #menslib, hasn't done its job properly yet, and femininity on a man is not as readily accepted as masculinity on a woman in our society. In anime, we quite often find a reversal of this. Effeminate men are normalized enough that in Gambling School, an anime featuring primarily female characters, when we first introduced to Batsume Rei, a short-haired, deep-pitched, curveless boyish figure in a male school uniform, we assume maleness without question. Her seduction of practically a whole harem of female classmates conforms to the heteronorm to the point that the only thing that really stands out about it is Rei's gratitude towards these girls for their affection and support, a thoughtfulness that isn't expected of traditional masculinity. It is only when she is revealed to be the season's villain that the anime acknowledges her queerness. This was also the point where I personally figured out that she was not a guy. I might have just not paid good enough attention or something, I don't know. Her previously unthreatening, heteronormed, as we call it in the biz, soft boy masculinity, is suddenly transformed into a lesbian threat to our straight female main cast. We feel scandalized. Just how could we accept this queer aberration before? We ask, clutching at our pearls in distress. We must have been tricked. Otherwise, what would happen to our own respectability? Ah yes, internalized queerphobia. Another thing that happens to everyone. It's this switch between conceptualizing the person in question as a phallic woman versus as an anti-phallic man that constitutes the trope of the trap. Traditional gender dictates a binary of the self and the other. The self, as per the gender-conforming cis norm, is supposed to be identified with, and the other, as per the heteronorm, is supposed to be felt attracted to. Not any other way around. When this system runs into queer people, it will attempt to categorize them as a variant of one or the other, a masculinized woman or a feminized man. Pick one. Thing is, androgyny don't work like that. So to a binary brain, it appears in a constant flux between the two options. Trying to pin it down as either one of them inevitably leads to opposition switching again and leaving us feeling foolish and distressed once more. Suddenly, another self becomes a distant other, and a familiarized other becomes an other itself. Our own identity is questioned as we find ourselves forced into or out of identifying with someone we previously thought of as fundamentally different or the same as ourselves, respectively. Internalized homophobia adds to the transphobia. If you're straight and you felt attracted to them before, but then they turned out to be the same thing as you, that attraction must have been gay to begin with. What if you're gay? What if you were not only wrong about their gender, but also your own straightness? What if you're just as queer of an abomination as they are? The programmed defensive response to this is repulsion and writing angry posts on the internet. I am here today to teach you a healthier, more rational way of dealing with these feelings. Let's start by looking at the problem, shall we? There are two scenarios to be considered when trying to answer this question. Scenario 1. You felt attracted to this person as the gender you're usually into, but then you found out that they are actually of a different gender, so now the nature of your initial attraction, and with that your label, has been put into question. Alternatively, you were aware that they were merely performing the gender you're usually into, but you still found yourself attracted to that performed illusion, so the nature of that attraction, and with that your label, is put into question by the performer's gender. A relatively recent media example of this would be Black Mirror's Striking Vipers, which I actually wrote an analysis on that you may find for your reading pleasure in the links below. In this first scenario, the answer lies neither in what the person's gender is, nor in how you perceive them, but in how you contextualize what you perceive. As an example, I am bisexual. That means, in my case, that I am into men and women, and not into my fellow non-binaries, because I am not pan. How do I know that, you may ask? There is no such thing as looking non-binary, or rather there is a bunch of ways to look non-binary that are visually indistinguishable from most gender non-conforming and trans-binary people. So I've had too many occasions where I would feel vaguely attracted to a new acquaintance, only for them to tell me that, hey, they're non-binary too, and my brain to go, oh, never mind then. As someone who grew up feeling attracted to all the genders I knew were a thing at the time, finding out you are technically straight is a big oof, let me tell you. And I've tried seeing my fellow bees in that way. I literally can't unless I am actively misgendering them. The androgyne in any trap trope scenario is contextualized in multiple ways, usually as a masculinized woman or a feminized man. Which gender do you see them as when you feel attracted to them? Try switching that and see if it changes something. Unless you're polysexual, it should. Generally, you will find that you're only attracted to them as the gender you're usually into. Congrats, straight people, you get to keep your label and your internalized homophobia. Yay! Wasn't that just so easy? Why is everybody making such a big fuss about this question? Was no big deal to that? Oh yeah. Scenario 2, right? Scenario 2. You feel attracted to this person because of their androgyny. People only preoccupy themselves with reveal narratives because they know they're reveal narratives. The cat's out of the bag. If you really were no longer interested in this person because of their real gender, why are you still here? Those hot straight passing guys on the tube that stare at me whenever I've worn out my mustache don't stare at me because they think I'm some straight girl they are into. They stare at me because I am clearly not a straight girl, and yet here they are, being into me. Is that even allowed? Note, while I personally still find it mildly amusing whenever this happens, maybe don't stare at strangers on public transportation to figure out whether you're into a certain minority group or not. After all, you can stare at me all you like here on YouTube. The question of whether or not something is gay still comes up even when the person's gender is known from the start.
Yeah, I went on a date with a friend of mine, so we were in this bar and we'd had a few drinks and we started making out. I'm kind of a legend. All of a sudden he just stops and he goes, God, this is so crazy for me. And I was like, oh, why? And he goes, I'm not even gay. I was like, what? I'm a girl and you're a boy. Like, this is the definition of straight.
Harken back to Julian Avery. If there is the idea that Avery's masculinity could have given away his maleness, is there something male about a masculine woman in the first place? And if so, does that mean that there is something gay to a man feeling attracted to her? Luckily, in Julia's case, her boyfriend is Jacob, Pretty Boy Crop Top Andrews, her co-host and a fellow gender nonconformist. It tends to be much easier to date another genderqueer person because all of this worrying about gender norms isn't really a thing if you're both already outside of them. Issues can arise when a straight identified cis person who is more or less assimilated into gender conforming heteronormative society starts dating a genderqueer person who usually by default isn't. I call these queer straight relationships. It's a working title. And they're more common than one might think. Most of my own dating pool consists of dark people, as we learned from my last scripted video. The main difference between this kind of straight relationship and one between gender-conforming cis people is that in the former, the non-queer partner is generally going to get some level of second-hand discrimination based on who they're dating. Obviously not as bad as the discrimination their partner faces, but they are going to have to fight for their relationship more so than they might be used to. Mind you, that is not a reason to avoid dating genderqueer people you would otherwise want to date. That would make you a coward, and that wouldn't be very sexy of you, would it now? Also, it is getting more socially acceptable to have an openly queer straight relationship, which is why those boys on the tube have very good reason to be curious about me. They're trying to figure out what my deal is so they can figure out what their deal is in relation to that. So what kind of gender deals are there? Any person's gender is made up of several aspects: gender identity, physical sex characteristics, societal gender role, and gender expression. I'm not going to bother with spectrum because a spectrum can't represent the complexity we need for this discussion. As an example, neither a dress nor a beard is androgynous on its own, but put together, they make an androgynous look. A singular dot on a spectrum cannot accurately reflect that. Traditional gender norms dictate you are either something like this or something like this. Anyone who significantly enough falls outside of these falls under the category of genderqueer or gender diverse people, and there are different types of those. I am a non-binary person. That means I identify as something other than strictly a man or strictly a woman. I am also a trans person because the gender role I was assigned at birth does not match my gender identity, which in mine, as well as many other trans people's case, means I experience something called gender dysphoria. Dysphoria is just the worst feeling and caused by a mismatch between one's current gender situation and what one would prefer it to be. Transition is there to ease this discomfort. Trans women are women who were born with a penis. Trans men are men who were born with a vagina. Non-binary people can have any birth assignment, including those born intersex. Intersex refers to anyone whose natural physical sex characteristics fall outside of the binary gender norm, and intersex people can have any gender identity. While there are intersex people that identify as trans and non-binaries that don't, as a group, intersex people don't fall under the trans umbrella and most non-binaries do. Someone who isn't trans, so whose assigned gender role and their gender identity match, is called a cis person. You, my dear viewer, might be one of those. Finally, people whose gender expression falls outside of what their gender role dictates are called gender non-conforming people. This is a broad category, but an important one to include in conversations about genderqueer issues, such as the one we're discussing today. With gender nonconformity being a widely normalized thing, and trans people being able to transition properly, generally the only contexts we still find actual cross-dressers in are performative ones, like drag or crossplay, and in fetish communities. Although I'm too vanilla to confirm the latter, so I'ma just take other people's word for it. When it comes to visibly androgynous people, it is oftentimes hard to tell what somebody's identity is just by looking at them. Luckily, I have some helpful pointers for that. People who frequently get misgendered will generally put more effort into reinforcing their identity in other ways. Look out for gendered words they use on themselves, pronoun badges, and the like. Out trans-binary people will generally never use their old pronouns, while non-binaries and some gender non-conforming people are a bit more free in their pronoun use. I use she, her, and he, him pronouns because I am hexalingual and cannot be bothered. He, him lesbians are sapphic women and non-binary people who use he, him pronouns for butch reasons or something, I don't know. It's a historic thing, it's fine, just go with it. Hello Kitty's date mate is a he, him lesbian, we stan, it's cool. Finally, dysphoria has an impact. If they are seeking out or going through medical transition, they are usually trans. If they know stuff about medical transition and how it works, they are also most likely trans. Even if you have a trans friend, you're not going to know as much about it as if you were trans yourself. If they use non-permanent body mods, there is a high likelihood that they are trans. Pre-med trans-binaries tend to have the highest use of these things. With non-binaries, it can vary from very high use to very low. And gender non-conforming people tend to use them more in cross-dress, like drag or crossplay, than in their everyday life. Although the latter is not unheard of. Think Elliot Page binding in every show she's been in for the past few years. Binder lesbians are very valid. Also, not knowing or doing some or any of these things does not necessarily mean someone isn't trans. Everyone has a different journey. Not everyone has the same access to info and resources. And sometimes the effort just outweighs the dysphoria that day and you just can't be bothered. These are all just rough rules of thumb that, where applicable, can help you figure out something about a genderqueer person without having to bother them about it. They are not a definitive guide on who is or is not trans. This is all theory, so let's have a look at a fictional androgynous person to actually apply what we just learned. In the 2010 anime, Princess Jellyfish, the nerd girl protagonist Tsukimi meets a fashionable person named Kuronosuke, who is revealed to be a male crossdresser. Now, in 2010, a lot of the language we use around genderqueerness today wasn't around yet. And in this case, there's the added difficulty of the show originally being in Japanese, where different terms to the ones in English are in use. For the sake of this exercise, I will attempt to label Kura by current-day English-speaking standards. I posit that Kura is not a cis-male crossdresser, but rather, and bear with me here, I know it's a lot, but I'll explain in a minute, a femme amab, non-binary he, him, lesbian. Yes, that is the most accurate one I could come up with. Don't worry, I'll break it down. We've already established that Kura is amab and generally presents somewhere between effeminate and fully injoso. He isn't a trans woman because he's quite comfortable with his boy mode. However, he isn't a crossdresser either because crossdressing needs a line to be crossed. But when I do drag, despite there being a certain overlap between me and my drag king Valentine's expression, it might help that we share a closet. I have a clearly defined line between him and myself. From different gender identities to pronouns to general theatrics, he is a persona that is solidly defined as different from me. In Kura's case, there is no clear line between him in Joso and him out of Joso. On multiple occasions throughout the series, he wears only part of his full get-up, and despite supposedly only using cross-dressing in order to piss off his dad, and later also to be allowed to hang out with his new friends at the no boys allowed all-female dorm that Tsukimi lives at one point he goes through the trouble of putting on his wig to go check on Tsuki in the middle of the night, despite the girls knowing what his regular hair looks like at this point, and no one seeing him in the first place. He also isn't a gender non-conforming cis guy because he would be insisting on his gender identity more. Other characters make a strong point of defending their manhood, most of all against misgenderers, but Kura doesn't seem to be too bothered being mistaken for a girl. By process of elimination, that means he must be non-binary. I'm using he/him pronouns on him because he uses male-associated language in both the Japanese original and the English translation, although there is more of a focus on using he/him pronouns on him in the translation because English needs its emotional support gendering, so Tsuki can't just be like, pretty person. Finally, Kura likes girls, and what is notable about this show compared to lots of other cross-dressing narratives is that it doesn't present that as something that is in opposition to his feminine expression. He is popular with girls at school and in his fashion circles, and his crush on Tsukimi, spoilers, I guess, but they're adorable, so you're welcome, is almost always presented in the context of him being in Joso, rather than as a guy trying to prey on girls in boy mode while befriending them in girl mode. In one scene, he and Tsukimi even get harassed as a gay couple, and in another one, where he almost kisses her, he is the one wearing makeup. He is not a guy, uses he/him pronouns, and his attraction to girls is specifically portrayed in a sapphic way down to the discrimination. Non-binary, he/him, lesbian. Okay, so you might be attracted to certain androgynous people. Maybe. A little bit. What would that mean for your label, though? Well, the traditional way of labeling orientation is based on what your and your love interest's gender are, and whether they are the same or different. Self and other. We just learned how to determine what a given androgynous person's gender situation is, but traditional labeling methods are not made for that level of complexity. They're not going to work because androgyny fluctuates when it is applied to a binary system, so its orientation labels will too. In the Rocky Horror Picture Show, there is a scene where the transvestite character Frankenfurter tries to individually seduce both of the straight couple that stumbled into the queer alien's castle. Morons. He takes on the role of the heterosexual other for each of them, but we as the audience are left to wonder which one of them is being tricked into some gay shit right now. Surely it must be Chad or whatever his name was. Yet, with Frank having presented in his feminine way and having shown interest in men throughout the movie, his interaction with Janet suddenly becomes the subversive one. An androgyne's attraction to men as well as that to women are both queer-coded. The question we can't figure out isn't, is it gay? It's which one is the gay one, and in turn, which one is the straight one, because we can't tell anymore. I guess we didn't already know what gay means after all, did we? So what is gay? Sometimes gay is used as an umbrella term to refer to the queers as a whole, which has its own whole discourse around it about how we should avoid it wherever possible in order to avoid erasing non-gay identities within the community. But then your bisexual ass still watches Birds of Prey and goes, "Shit, I'm gay for this," so what is the truth, you know? Actual gay-identified people also no longer use just one definition of the word. I know lesbians who define their attraction as to women, regardless of birth assignment, to afab people, regardless of identity, or even to anyone but cis men. There are also plenty of trans women and non-binary people who identify as lesbians. And if non-binaries can be sapphics, does that mean men-attracted non-binaries can be achillans, and then does that in turn mean that I, as a binary-attracted bisexual non-binary, can be both sapphic and achillan at the same time, despite not even being into my own gender? And if I'm not sapphic, then why did I enjoy Birds of Prey so much? Labels cover more of a general area of potential meanings than one specific thing these days. Let's go back to our Princess Jellyfish example. We've determined that Kura is a non-binary he/him lesbian, but I would categorize Tsuki's attraction to him as pan. Not only because he's non-binary and pan is the only widely used label that explicitly includes that, but because she shows attraction to him as any gender she perceives him as. She mistakes him for a girl when they first meet, and there is a consistent focus before and after the reveal on her admiring his feminine beauty. Meanwhile, she gets flustered when she first finds out that he's a guy, and we know she likes guys because she has a whole crush love triangle situation with him and his brother. Finally, some of the most intimate and romantic scenes that they share, like that almost kiss that I am just obsessed with, happen specifically in spaces that show off his androgyny to its fullest. Suki's reverence of him doesn't change based on what gender she sees him as, but rather applies to all of them. She's pan. The most accurate way of labeling attraction that involves gender complexity is not via the actual genders of the people involved, but rather via how their attraction works. It ain't gay unless you feel it in a gay way. So what does that mean for you? It's important to keep in mind that labels are just words we use to describe things. They don't define your identity, they're just there to communicate it as best as possible. In the end, no one gets to label you other than yourself. What I can do for you is give you some pointers once again. If you've ever felt straight attraction, you are most likely not gay. Yay, it says you're internalized homophobia. You might be bi or pan or something that doesn't have a name yet, but you can rest assured that your duaric attraction is not made void by any other one you might experience. If you feel attracted to trans-binary people of the same gender as the cis people you usually feel attracted to, you will generally keep your label as is. For example, if you were straight identified, you will most likely remain straight identified when dating a trans person of the opposite gender. It might be a more complex version of straightness than the one you were brought up to expect, and it might differ from a relationship with a cis person in some ways, but ultimately, it's still a straight relationship. If you feel attracted to trans people because of their transness, you might consider a label like trans attracted, which some trans people don't like that label because they feel it invalidates their identity as men and women, while others really like it because they feel it empowers them as trans men and women. This label also tends to only apply to trans-binary people. If you have felt attraction to multiple genders, you might want to consider words like bi, pan, or polysexual. These can take many different forms, ratios, and intensities, so don't worry if it's not the kind of 50-50 between men and women split that you might have heard of. If you feel attraction to mostly one binary gender and also some androgynous or non-binary people, you might want to do it like one of my old lecturers who had a non-binary partner and called himself mostly straight. I thought that one was fun. There's also words like homo and heteroflexible for situations like these. And finally, you don't need to have a label if you can't find one that fits you. Sexuality and identity are complicated, and while labels are useful, there aren't that many to describe this kind of attraction yet. Also, see my last scripted video. Some people end up using queer where applicable, or just kind of giving up on labels entirely, because it's simply more complicated than any of the ones currently at their disposal, and that's okay. I hope some of you found this excursion into androgyny and attraction to it helpful in any way. Like and subscribe to my channel if you would like to see more of this lovely face, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers! I'm tired. I just want to read it. Can I just read it? What if we put the camera like just up there and then I can just read it and it'll look like I look at the camera? I don't have pearls on. Oh my god, I forgot the pearls. I was gonna do my bit with the pearls. Oh no. Clutches at my non-existent pearls. As per the heteronorm, is supposed to be attracted to feel attracted. You of an abomination. You can say an abomination. What if you're just as queer of an abomination? Tries to seduce both of the straight couple. They exist. I want to believe that straight people exist. Do you want to see my shorts? Ignore the Final Fantasy noises, it's fine. I'll definitely be able to use this footage, definitely, with the audio intact and everything. Look at this. Look at my legs. Look at these. Hello. How are you? Okay, what if... Right. I don't know. What do we want? What do we want? We're so pretty. Why is my voice useless? Why is my voice absolutely useless? God, okay. What is this video?